So I'd arrived early, and I went off to a coffee bar with the script, and I started reading it, and I started laughing. And it's quite unusual to actually laugh when you're just reading something light. And of course, once we started making it, and we knew how the characters were actually going to say themselves, on it originally seen in black and white, it became even funnier. So yeah, I don't think we thought it would go on for as long as it did, but I think we knew it was going to be a bit of a success.
Just to correct you going first, my name is... It's okay. You would. Yes, exactly the same as Kim. I sat in reception in the old television centre reading the script, having been asked for one by David Croft, and I think I wondered whether, humorous Stockwell was quite a good idea, but then I thought, well, it's David Croft, and of course, like Tim, halfway through the script, I was kind of sniggering behind my hand, hoping that he was noticing me in the reception. And then once we started doing it, once we started rehearsing and actually shooting shows, by the time we were on about the third episode, I think we knew we had a hit.
I am sorry, you will laugh though, because I told my mum honestly that I was doing this and about the panels, and she was like, "You're too young to do this though," and I was like, "Well, thank you so much for having faith in me that I will be okay to actually do this." And she was like, "Well, shouldn't they have got someone a bit older to do the panel?" And I was like, "Okay, thanks mum, like, great, thank you." So I did end up having to watch a few episodes on YouTube, so I did obviously know about the show, so I did see the appeal of it, and it is great. It's obviously so famous for its running gags and like that slapstick comedy. Did you find any scenes like super challenging to like film because it was so funny, or anything like that? Have you got any funny stories to share with us?
Well, there was actually one series, I think it was series 6, where Richard Gibson, who played Herr Flick, and I couldn't look at each other when we were playing scenes together. And we had to look at each other's shoulders rather than look at each other's faces, because otherwise we laughed. And the trouble was that when you look at somebody else and you see them looking at your shoulder instead of your face, that makes you want to laugh even more. So it was a nightmare every time we had a scene. We were doing rehearsals, and I think it was possibly something to do with the nerves and actually recording in front of a studio audience. And David Croft very much wanted us to record and not stop, because he felt that the laughs were never the same if you had to repeat them. So there was a big pressure to get it right the first time round. And I can remember that every week I would come out at the end with fingernail marks in the palms of my hand from just trying not to laugh when I was talking to Herr Flick.
I think that would probably be series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because when the two of them got together, they were impossible. I don't think I remember as any specific scene being difficult. But of course, people often ask what one's favourite scene was, or what scenes were, and apart from for me, the famous action scene in the pilot, it was playing a scene with Kenneth Connor, the interrogation of Monsieur Alphonse, which I found myself, the part of the actor that is outside the character, that's hitting marks, tiny laughs, follow that sort of thing. And there's always a little part of you that's watching what you're doing and not actually doing it. And that little part of me was thinking, here I am in Studio One at the BBC Television Centre with a large live audience, and I'm acting with Kenneth Connor, who I grew up watching in the Carry On films. So that's what I have to say about that.
So obviously you have got your costumes on, which I think is so iconic. I love a costume. I normally do cosplay competitions and I'm normally always in a costume, but today I thought, not today, I just rolled out of bed like this. But is there anything else that you kept from set? I always like to ask this because some of the things that people always tell me, I'm like, how did you steal that off set? Like, do people not notice these things? So go on, and I need to know what have you stolen from set?
Well, I can't remember actually stealing anything, but I have got a corset or two, which were actually given to me when we were nearing the end in Series 10, I was there. The costume designer said, listen, these are just going to disappear anyway. So you might as well take them instead of somebody else needing them. So I did.
And for me, again, the matches scene, I still have a box of matches from the first scene in the pilot, which I'm very proud of.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So I've got a question for you, Kim. So obviously Helga is seen as intimidating but lovable. How did you balance that on screen, like to find, find that balance?
Yeah, well, I think it was more luck than anything. I never knew that Helga was lovable, really. I always tried to play her as being sort of intimidating or trying to be intimidating, but failing. Because I've always think the thing about the Germans in Hello, Hello was that they didn't ever really get it right. And so Helga tried to be fierce and stern. She wasn't really. And I think also she didn't really quite know what was going on with Herr Flick. She was sort of trying to spy on him on behalf of the colonel and the captain, but at the same time she sort of got involved more with Herr Flick than she meant to. So she ended up spying on the colonel and the captain, Herr Flick. And yeah, it got a bit complicated sometimes. That's the end of that.
I mean, she obviously was lovable because of the amount of people still here to see you talk. So, and Guy, obviously, you with you had that memorable charm. Was that inspired by anyone, or did that just come naturally to you? Is that just who you are as a person?
Oh, no, it came completely naturally to me. What I always say in answer to a question like this is I miss Lieutenant Hoover very much. He was a much nicer man than I.
Would you have imagined, obviously back then, that it still would have this sort of dedicated following even now, and it still be so iconic today? Like you're here doing this now?
Absolutely not. No! I mean, I'd have never got that audition if I thought I was auditioning for what has happened to us since. I mean, it's nervous enough doing an audition for a producer or a director when it's just one episode of something which you hope might go to maybe one series. But the fact, it's been quite extraordinary, this job, and never in a million years would I imagine that I'd still be sitting here 40 years later, dressed as Helga, talking about Hello, Hello. It's incredible.
I second everything Kim does.
One thing I always like to ask, and I always obviously do quite a few of the puns now, I always find that guests always have these really funny stories about what fans have either bought them or reenactments that they've done. Have you got any little funny stories about what fans have done or bought you or anything like that? I mean, you can say no, I just thought it's always fun to ask.
Sure, there must be something. I can't think of anything at the moment. I think, oh, she could die.
I can't think of anything. I'm going to pass you back to Kim.
Right, you have to going to do something weird so we can ask that again. So, someone do something weird. Right, so, Have we got a few questions? Yeah, amazing. Well, hang on before we go on to questions then, I know that you have a little podcast that we want to talk about, don't we? So, tell us obviously about that. I have here where have I even put it? So it's the Listen Very Carefully podcast from Helga Gruber and her Flick. So on Spotify, Apple and Podbean. Will you tell us a little bit about the podcast and what everyone can expect?
Yeah, well, it's actually on, I think, all the podcast platforms, so you can just go to whichever one your favourite is. And we actually, Mark Simon is in fact the first person to have the idea, because he'd been listening to a podcast about keeping up appearances, which was done by a couple of fans. And he phoned me up and he said, you should think about doing the same thing for LOLO, because you're actually members of the cast and you really have a few good stories to tell. So we got together, me, Guy and Richard, because we always do come together, us three Germans, and we decided we'd have a go in my kitchen. Now my kitchen, I live in a 15th century, 16th century cottage, and so the kitchen is full of, it's got a low ceiling and wooden beams. So we decided that we were going to just have a go round the table, see if it had any sort of chemistry or if we thought it was going to work. And then we go into the studio and record it. And once we recorded this tryout, the sound was so good from the wooden beams, that's muffling any sort of bounce or sharpness, that we decided we would record it in my kitchen. Which then meant that we started eating in my kitchen, drinking gin in my kitchen, and Prosecco, and I will let Guy carry on.
And more gin. The podcast is also available on YouTube, so you can actually see us in Kim's kitchen, behaving outrageously. And
That's outrageous. I think we keep our clothes on.
sometimes.
I want to invite to this podcast on drinking gin. That sounds amazing, and I can imagine it goes very, very wild.
In fact, what we do is we watch an episode of the show, and then we talk about it. So we tell stories that happen behind the scenes and various things. Have a look at that and you'll see that this is wrong or that's wrong, or there's a strange noise going on when we're walking down some wooden steps which should actually be stone, and silly things like that.
Yes, and we tell stories about the making of specific scenes, which can lead to some hilarity and more gin.
Amazing. So I will obviously pass it over for some questions now. So yeah, hands up, we'll have some questions. Amazing. I will, right, this is where I'm going to have to run to the job. I only have fans on, not massive platform boots.
So LOL was like proper appointment television. We've really enjoyed watching every series with the mum and dad all sat together, which doesn't happen anymore. Can you imagine the size of the room in the Comic-Cons at things then? And do you remember the first time you did the grooming?
Well, although it wasn't Comic-Con, after the end of the third series, we did a stage show, which toured the country before going into the West End. And on our very first night at the Birmingham, was it the Hippodrome?
No, the Alex.
Pacific Birmingham Alexander. Just before the show started, we peeped out. We knew that every seat had been sold, which we had no idea was going to happen. And in the audience were all these people dressed as different characters from the show. And it was sort of quite disquieting actually. I got quite frightened because I thought, oh my goodness, I've got so much to live up to when I walk out there and start speaking. But in fact, it was incredible. We did a 12-week tour around the country before we went into the West End. Never a seat to be had. And loads of people in the costumes. So It was sort of before Comic-Con days, but
Yes, that opening night at the Alex, the opening night of the tour. And as Tim said, we had no idea what we were in for, how popular it was going to be, whether this tour was going to make a lot of money or be a damn squib. And as she said, the whole of the first 2 rows of the Alex Theatre were people in costume. So I walked on and I was looking at sort of 6 groupers. Not to put too fine a point on it, when we came off stage, we had a sort of reception backstage, and I remember David Croft said to us, I thought the roof was going to come off the building. And this was a man who'd been in the business for 70 years.
I bet you thought you drank loads of gin, then you saw loads of yourself looking back again.
I think a little champagne was imbibed on that evening.
and a few mini bars raided.
Why not? Why not? Some more questions? Yeah, amazing.
Were there many injuries happening to the cast? I know John D. Collins broke his ankles from the podcast that we said. Were there many injuries or very, very bad accidents that happened on the set?
Well, the only one I can remember was actually not one of the regular members of the cast, but we were in a church filming a wedding, I imagine it must have been, somebody getting married, and there were weddings all over the place, and I think I was dressed up as a nun, and Rick was probably dressed up as a nun as well. And there were some supporting artists who were playing members of the choir. And we had, in those days, I don't know if it can happen anymore, but we had proper candles. And he had a sort of diaphanous coat or whatever it's called. And suddenly, flames started leaping up his back. And he didn't know. And we were going, help, stop. And we had to be thrown to the floor by an assistant stage manager and sort of rolled around to put the flames out. Luckily, he wasn't hurt, but gosh, it was a bit dramatic.
There was one really unpleasant episode when we were shooting at Linford Hall, which was the chateau, the set we used for the chateau, and one of the crew, I think he was a lighting technician or something, had been up in the ceiling area, attached to some lights, and he fell through the ceiling. And he was taken off to hospital. He in the end, he was fine, but we had to stop shooting. It was really rather dramatic. And of course, whatever it was in those days, £1,000 an episode or something, it matters a lot when you have to stop shooting. It matters very seriously. And the director was a trainee, was one of David's assistants who was being promoted. He's now a very glamorous director and producer. But then he was very young and very inexperienced. David arrived on the set at lunchtime, and we'd lost half a day. And he picked up, it was 50 slates in the afternoon, and got us back on schedule, and that was just who David Croft was. Calm, collected, no nonsense. Next. Got it all done. It was wonderful to watch.
That does sound good. Right, and then you've got a question I haven't here yet.
Look at the size of me. I was glamorous and slim in those days. No, this is actually, I've had this made. I used to hire my own costume, which was made for me from Angels, the costumier to whom the BBC had sold their wardrobe. And I used to have to hire my costume for an event like this £250 plus VAT for the weekend. So one day a friend of mine who was actually one of his many hats he wears, student, and he said, I can make you one for £800, I think it cost him. So he did, and here we are. And anyway, as I say, I could no longer get into women's costume. No way.
And this uniform is from Series 5. But I didn't steal it.
Still slim and elegant.
They actually made, Series 5 was 26 episodes long because at the time they were hoping to sell it to America. And America always bought things in 26 episode chunks. As it turned out, it never happened. But they made me 2 uniforms. So at the end of this particular batch of 26 episodes, the costume designer said to me, they're going to make a new uniform for you when you come to do Series 6 anyway. So would you like to take one of these? So I said, yes, please. So I took it and I gave him I think it was a case of champagne in exchange. And here I am.
Little knowing you'd be still wearing it 40 years later.
I just love the fact you've had to hire back your own costume. Like, that literally... You're like, it's me, like, that is mine. But, is there anyone else got any questions that you are... Oh, of course you would.
Scott!
Oh, come on.
I'm so sorry. If they were to remake a Low Low today, and you had a choice, who would you choose to play your characters?
Monsieur Alphonse.
Wait.
Swiftly and with style. Oh, to play my character? Well, there was nobody anywhere near.
Yes, I can't think. Maybe Charlize Theron.
Good choice. Good choice.
Would you ever come back to do, like, if the BBC rang you and was like, let's redo it, would you come back?
No, there was a rather appalling incident about 10 years ago where some members of the cast did go back and... Did you do it?
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
2008, I think.
Well, it didn't really work. They showed little clips of us when we were young and beautiful, and then you saw members of the cast 20 years later, not looking quite so young or beautiful, and it didn't quite work, did it?
It didn't. It's called Return to Hello Hello, and it's part of the series now. But no, it didn't really work. I think it was a mistake. I don't think we should have done it. And a little like, there were several occasions when people approached us and wanted to make a film of the series. And I'm so glad we never did. Because all of David Croft's series, which were made into films, were less than brilliant, I have to say.
Be a little honest about it. Like, usually they'll be like, yeah, I'll come back, whatever, like another paycheck, but they'll be honest. Any more questions? Anyone? Yeah? A favour? Yeah?
Would you like to come for a ride? Flat out with my ventilators open will be quite an exhilarating experience.
Okay, right, I'll come around here. I'm so glad to put my bands on today.
Hi guys, okay. Sorry to change the scene of Hello Hello, but just wanted to ask you what it was like working on Star Trek and Stories.
Wonderful.
Wait for me. Hang on. There's only one mic and one of me.
I'm sorry. It was wonderful for a couple of reasons. The The first was actually arriving on set. Driving in, you couldn't do it now, I'm sure, but driving onto the set of Paramount through that famous arch with the 4 studios, you could see them, and in between them, you could see the Hollywood sign in the distance. It's an iconic view, and I just thought, my God, I've arrived. And yes, and then of course, working on an iconic series, and lucky me. And there were several, I won't mention their names, actors who were every bit as well known as me, and some a great deal better known than me, who had also auditioned for the same part, and so I was rather pleased.
Best person got it, didn't they? So,
Oh, thank you.
amazing. We wish we have time for one more question, if anyone has one. Yeah?
Just, you're one of the very few people who've been on Star Trek and Doctor Who. What was the difference?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Star Trek fan.
Different characters, different periods, different shows. I'm supposed to be rather famously the only one of the very few actors who's been in who's been involved in all the big 4 sci-fi franchises. You know, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, and Babylon 5. That at one time was all over the internet. What can I tell you?
I mean, that is incredible in itself. Like, the fact that you can say that you've been in all of them. That is amazing. But I think that is everything for today. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to me, and obviously please make sure that you check out their podcast, obviously on wherever you can find podcasts, especially on YouTube, so you can see them getting drunk on gin. And I want an invite to this gin party because it sounds amazing.
You're very welcome.
But thank you so much, and obviously next door you will find the table to grab your autos and selfies, and then there's even little tote bags to buy and everything, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Back.